Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Kari's Confessions, a Nonprofit Exec Tells All. I'm Kari Anderson, your host and principal with Incite Consulting. My podcast explores the tools and strategies that help nonprofit leaders grow their impact and build resilient organizations. As always, I'm here to share some hard earned lessons and honest truths from life inside the nonprofit world. I spent 25 plus years in the nonprofit sector in leadership roles with 7 organizations. Now, I provide coaching and consulting services to ensure that nonprofits like yours have the structure, systems, and practices to do your best work. Wherever I go, I continue to hear that nonprofit execs need a space to gather, to receive tools, feedback, and advice that encourages them to stay the course. It doesn't seem to matter if you're in a village of 182 or a metropolis of millions. Nonprofit work is both gratifying and lonely. I'm here to make sure that you have a chance to breathe, laugh, smirk, and get excited again about the important work that you do. So today, we're going to get into how you can build a culture of trust and accountability in your organization. So if you've spent any time working in or around nonprofits, you already know this. The organizations that really thrive aren't always the ones with the biggest budgets, the flashiest programs, or the slickest branding. After more than 20 years working alongside nonprofit leaders, boards, and teams, I can tell you this with absolute confidence. The organizations that last, the ones that actually adapt, grow, and actually move their mission forward are the ones where people trust each other enough to have hard conversations, own their mistakes, and pull in the same direction. And that's what I want to talk about today, building a culture of trust and accountability. Now, I know those words get tossed around a lot, and some of you may not be a fan at all about the word accountability because you think it's punitive. So just pause that for a second. Trust and accountability can start to sound like corporate buzzwords or something that you put into a strategic plan and then forget about. Check. But in my experience, trust and accountability aren't abstract ideas at all. They're deeply human, and they show up in very real, very tangible ways every single day. They determine whether your team shows up energized or deflated, whether your board meetings spark innovation or dread, whether your mission moves forward or quietly stalls out. So let's slow this down and talk about what trust and accountability really look like inside healthy nonprofit organizations and what it actually takes to build that culture in your shop. So, why do trust and accountability matter anyway? Well, when trust exists, something powerful happens. People stop hoarding information and start sharing ideas. They take calculated risks instead of playing it safe. They tell you what's really happening on the ground, not just what they think leadership wants to hear. And accountability shifts too. It stops being about catching people doing something wrong, the horror, and starts being about everyone pulling in the same direction. I've seen teams with limited resources outperform better funded organizations simply because they trusted one another and they wanted to hang together. They collaborated faster, they adapted more quickly, and they didn't waste energy on politics or covering their tracks. The connection between trust and productivity isn't theoretical, it's visceral, in fact. So you can feel it in the room. In the absence of trust, you can feel that too. The tension, the silence, the way people stop raising concerns until it's too late or until they've quit and then just letter to the editor. So let's get clear on what we're actually talking about. So, what do trust and accountability really mean anyway? Trust in an organization isn't about warm, fuzzy feelings, it's about reliability. It's about the belief that people will do what they say they'll do. Information that's shared is accurate. Decisions are made in the service of mission, not personal agendas. Hey, staff and board, this is an issue for both of you to address. Trust doesn't mean I have to constantly second guess what's happening behind the scenes. Accountability goes hand in hand with that. It's the willingness to own your responsibilities and, yes, your mistakes. We all make them. We're human. In nonprofits where the stakes are high and the margins are thin, accountability means everyone understands how their role, small or large, connects to the mission and accepts responsibility for their piece of the puzzle. No more of this, it's not my job. Don't get me started. One of the biggest mistakes I see organizations make is confusing trust with blind faith. Hope is not a strategy. Trust does not mean assuming that everything will magically work out. It's built through consistent, transparent leadership, leaders who show up the same way every day, share information openly, even when it's uncomfortable, and are willing to say, I don't have all the answers. Hey, heads up, executive directors, you don't have all the answers. I once worked with an organization where the ED regularly changed their story about funding projections. Nothing malicious, just optimistic updates that quietly shifted over time. But the impact was real. Staff stopped believing what they were told. Program planning stalled. Anxiety crept in. Contrast that with another organization where the executive director stood up at an all staff meeting and said, here's what we know, here's what we don't know, and here's how we'll decide next steps together. Same uncertainty, completely different outcome. When people know where they stand and why decisions are made, they stop wasting energy on speculation and start focusing on their work. Imagine. So, if we're going to create this culture of trust and accountability, we actually have to address psychological safety and responsibility. Two phrases that were not in our vernacular when I was working in the field. So, when trust takes root, psychological safety follows. People speak up in meetings. They share half-formed ideas without fear of ridicule. They admit when they're struggling before problems turn into major failures. I've watched boards transform from silent rubber stampers into engaged strategic partners simply because a new executive director created space for honest dialogue. Accountability changes too. Instead of finger pointing when something goes wrong, and it will, teams start asking, what can we learn? How do we prevent this next time? I've seen staff members proactively flag issues early, support overwhelmed colleagues, and take ownership without being chased down, not because they're afraid, but because they care. The nonprofit sector doesn't have room for the blame game, believe me. Trust and accountability together create this wonderful environment where people want to bring their best thinking to the table. So, how do you as a leader build this culture at your organization? Here's the truth. You can't build it on vague expectations. Your team needs clarity. This is where SMART goals really matter, not just as a management exercise once a year, right, during strategic planning, but as a shared language. There's a big difference between telling a development director to increase fundraising and saying we're aiming to raise $250,000 in individual donations by December 31st. Different. That clarity, while it still make you a little nauseous, creates confidence and accountability. But goals alone aren't enough. I've watched leaders set goals in January and then disappear until the annual review. That's not accountability, that's abandonment. The real work happens in consistent check-ins. So staff buck up. You need to meet regularly with your supervisors. So these check-ins aren't interrogations. They're not status updates designed to catch mistakes, but real conversations when you both are asking what's working, what's getting in the way, and how can I help? Board chairs, this also resonates when you're having your one-on-ones with your executive directors. When someone is falling short, your job isn't to blame, it's to understand the obstacles and remove them when possible. That approach strengthens trust instead of eroding it. So, part and parcel with creating trust and accountability is transparent communication. So, transparent communication is where so many of our nonprofits struggle and where the biggest gains can happen without expending an awful lot of energy or cost. So, thriving organizations create feedback loops that move in all directions. What does that mean? Regular opportunities for staff to raise concerns safely, open forums where leadership names challenges honestly, sharing setbacks alongside wins, and always providing an anonymous feedback channel when there are sensitive issues to discuss. I once worked with a comm director who raised concerns about an unrealistic campaign timeline. Leadership listened, as they should, adjusted expectations, and publicly acknowledged the issue. That moment sent a powerful message to the organization. Honesty is valued here. And the result? Problems surfaced earlier, innovation increased, and staff retention improved. Your response to honesty determines whether people will speak up again. So there's challenges, right? Whenever we're trying to create something new at an organization, and culture challenges are real. So this kind of culture and how we build it, it's not easy to do. So acknowledge first that there's going to be some resistance to change, and some of that resistance might start with you. People who have learned to keep their heads down don't immediately trust openness. This could be board director, this could be a staff member. That resistance most of the time isn't personal. It's protective. Consistency over time is what shifts it, right? Show up, do the work. Actions speak louder than words. So, secondly, unclear vision among managers oftentimes will take culture down. So, if leaders can't articulate why trust and accountability matter or what they look like in practice, confusion will spread quickly. Your team need examples, not slogans. And something I was guilty of, certainly when I was younger in the sector, micromanagement. This one is huge. I have seen well intentioned leaders say they trust their teams and then hover over every decision. That destroys trust faster than almost anything else. Real accountability requires ownership and room to stumble occasionally. So, let's talk about some tools that might support building this type of culture at your organization. The right tools can make trust and accountability visible in your organization. I've watched nonprofits struggle with endless spreadsheets and email chains and then transform when expectations and progress were transparent. So we've got tech tools now, right, folks? It's not the 1900s anymore or even the 20th century. We've got things like Asana or Monday.com for project ownership and probably 17,000 other examples as well. Things like 15.5 or Lattice for check-ins, Slack or Teams for real-time communication. We've got dashboards for goals and progress. It doesn't matter what the tool is. And no, I'm not paid for any of these, right? In fact, I abhor most of them. But it's not the tool. It's how you use the tool. So determine a tool together, then you got to use it. When people can actually see where things stand, anxiety drops. Questions get answered earlier. Collaboration improves. Start simple. Just do something, right? Choose a tool that fit how your team actually works. It's not just one more thing for them to do. So the benefits: when trust and accountability take hold, everything changes at your organization. Collaboration becomes natural, performance improves, decision-making speeds up, innovation increases, retention improves, and the impact shows up externally too. Donors, board members, and partners feel the difference. I've seen it reflected in stronger fundraising results, better program outcomes, and healthier teams. So, culture doesn't change in one meeting or through a single memo. It changes through daily actions, through consistent leadership, through choosing transparency even when it sucks. I've watched leaders start strong and then revert to old habits. Guilty. When things get busy. The organizations that succeed are the ones that stay committed even under pressure. So here's my invitation to you today. Pick one thing, one conversation, one expectation to clarify, one channel to open. Start there. Your organization deserves a culture where people feel trusted, accountable, and empowered to do their best work. You have the power to create that environment. The real question is, will you commit to the daily work it takes to sustain it? Thanks for joining me today for Kari's Confessions and Nonprofit Exec Tells All. If you found this episode helpful, share it with a colleague or a board member, and make sure to follow me on your favorite streaming platforms. And for additional resources, follow me on LinkedIn. You can also check out my website at inciteconsultinggroup.com. Until next time, have a great week.